In this episode, we're going to get into what occurred to get to court and what occurred during court. So, upon being served by ISS at 4 p.m. on Thursday afternoon, to appear in court on Tuesday morning, about 9 or 10 a.m., 10 or 11 a.m. I think it was, it gave me 2 days to get advice, prepare documents, submit documents, serve documents, and appear in court. Now, when I received those documents, I read them on Thursday night. I then proceeded to see a lawyer on Friday morning, mid-morning. The lawyer went from 2,000 to 10,000 in 4 minutes flat. From there, I decided I'll give it a go. I'll try and do the documents myself, which was interesting because on the weekend, the lawyer I saw contacted me and said, ISS wants to know are we representing you or not. Now, how would ISS know that? The only way ISS would know anything would be if that lawyer contacted the ISS lawyer to get their side of the story. So there's a bit of, lawyers are very friendly to lawyers. Don't ever trust one because they will knife you in the back if they can get money out of it, and that's including money out of you or money out of them. So it's all about cash. It's not about saving you or rescuing you or defending your case or proving your point. It's about money. You don't have the money, they don't represent you. So I went home and I read the documents, and I noticed on the documents served to me in very fine writing down the bottom of the page, it referred to a responding document. So from the 3 responding documents I had to fill out, first I had to fill out a notice of defence. So I went onto the Supreme Court website, printed out one of them. A defence, so I went and printed out one of them. And a counterclaim, so I printed out one of them. Very simple forms to fill out. You don't need a lawyer. These guys were going to charge me 10 grand to fill those forms out. So I filled the forms out. I went over to a mate's house. There's a JP. He signed off on what I had done, stamped all my documents, and then I went and appeared at the Supreme Court Monday morning at about 10 a.m. Went to hand my documents over. Now, the lady behind the counter that you hand your documents to went off her tree. She was yelling at me, telling me, I've had 2 weeks to respond, I've had this, I've had that. We don't scan these documents, we hand type all these documents on. And it wasn't until I stopped her and said, hang on, I got served 4 o'clock Thursday afternoon to appear here tomorrow morning. There's not 2 weeks response time. There's 2 days, and you're not open on weekends. So she stopped in her tracks and went, hey, who's taking you to court? I said, ISS World. She then called a group of guys from behind her who came up, and she started passing out my documents to these gentlemen. And she said, don't worry, it'll be on the system. So at that point, I didn't realise the importance of that step until I got to court. But we'll get to that shortly. So I came back the next day, time to appear in court. I'm in there with a couple of people I know, and Tuck Thompson from the Courier Mail was in there, and ISS representatives including Peter Beadle was also in the courtroom, and a law firm, Emma Lawyers from Melbourne, and media guru lawyer, I don't know if he's a lawyer, barrister, QC, Adam Walker from Melbourne, and someone from Copenhagen. But they were in there, and this Adam Walker, media guru from Melbourne, comes up to me and says, are you Troy Agate? I said, yeah. He goes, get outside. Thought you arrogant fuck. But anyway, I went outside. So I'm outside, and this guy starts ranting like he's a grandfather from my family who I've stolen money from, or stole his car and driven it into some wall or something. He said, you're going to do this, 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 and hand over all these documents, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do that, the whole list of everything that he put in the claim to the courts. And I said, I'm pretty sure that's going to hurt my case. And he goes, I don't give a fuck about your case. This is my house. And if you walk into that courtroom, you won't see the day of light for a decade. And I looked at him and went, well, how's go and get fucked down? So that was the end of that conversation. He stormed off. Now, me thinking we're going to go into a trial now, so I went back in and short trials were called up. So of course they stand up and I have to go to the front as well. And the same guy, now I don't know if he had a hearing problem, Adam Walker, if you're watching this, I don't know if you got a hearing problem or you're just complete fucking idiot, mate. But he stands up and says, Troy's gonna do this, he's going to apply for applications to disseminate information, I'm going to stop any media publications, I'm going to hand over all the documents, I'm going to do a lot of stuff that we never spoke about and I disagreed to. So for some reason he had this idiot idea that I'm going to now plead guilty to the judge. I've gone for this for 4 years and now all of a sudden, because he said so, I'm going to plead guilty. Adam Walker, you're an idiot. Seriously. So we stand up in front of the courtroom and the judge looks at me and he says, well, how about we get Mr. Aggett to see a lawyer so he knows what he's getting into and what he's going to sign. And I put my hand up. And the judge said, yes, Mr. Aggett. And I said, well, that's not what happened. I said, I told him to go and get stuffed. I said, I disagreed with everything he said, and I said, I'm not doing it. So the judge looks at this Adam Walker and says, well, it seems like you had a conversation with someone else. Now, I can get the exact transcript because I have the transcript, so if you need to see the transcript, by all means contact me and we'll talk about letting you have a look at the transcript. But so after that, he called us back for a long trial. Now, for 6 hours, ISS security went to town. I'd stolen, procured, computer hacked, break and enter, intimidated, harassed, victimised. The list was long over everything that I'd done and disseminated. All which was incorrect, all which was wrong, all what was bullshit, all what was slander, all what was defamation. Adam Walker, you're definitely an idiot. So the judge pulled me up 3 times for not paying attention. And he finally pulled me up and stood me up and he said, Mr. Aggett, do you know how serious these allegations are? You could be doing 10 years in jail for this stuff. It's very illegal. To which I responded that no, I didn't know how serious this was, and I don't know where I read it. I read it somewhere in a book, but I'm pretty sure when you're making allegations against someone in a court of law, you would probably have some form of evidence to the fact of what you're claiming. And I informed the judge, furthermore, that ISS had lied to him on 3 occasions so far, and the first occasion was Peter Beadle was still employed by ISS. Technically, yes, he was employed on leave for what they said was testicular cancer, which would be something to do with my last name being Aggett. So I'm the cancer. It's not hard to do the maths. And the fact that they claimed they'd never been fined by an Australian authority for any breaches of legislation in Australia, which they did. They got fined in Darwin for using unlicensed security guards. And I can't remember the third one right now, but there was a third one, but we'll get back to that when we start looking at documents. And the judge sat back and said, oh, furthermore, I said to the judge before he said anything, I said to him, firstly, my documents are stamped freedom of information. I said, that means my documents are open for public release, at which point we're in the wrong courtroom, because that would come under the Constitutional Court, not the Supreme Court. But that's only my belief, and that would mean that you can't make a judgment until it goes to the Constitutional Court. So the judge sat back and looked at the roof and said, maybe I'll hear what you've got to say. Now, the minute he said that and I went to open my mouth, the entire Emma lawyers, Adam Walker, and whoever the other two boys were dressed in suits, all jumped up and went objection. The judge kindly looked at them and said, you do know he has all this on file. I kid you not, if the video was available, their mouths were so open, like hippopotamus sticking it out the water, in shock that I'd got these documents on file without a lawyer in under 2 days. So they're all in shock and looking at me with their mouths wide open, catching flies. It was absolutely a goal-scoring moment for me. I felt so privileged to be standing there looking at these idiots. So they sat down. I had one piece of paper to read, and I read through all the points of process: date, fact, time, issue. It's all you ever need in a courtroom. So I went down my list. Now, second from the bottom, I got to applying for obstruction and hindrance of a Commonwealth official. Now, the judge sat back, looked at the roof, scratched his chin, looked at me and went, who's a Commonwealth official in all this? And I said, well, that was me. I said I was Australian Federal Police Protective Service when all this was happening. And he looked at the table, and then he looked at their side and went, and I kid you not, another gold-setting moment, he goes, oh really? And all their faces at the table. No one looked at the judge. They were absolutely shut up quiet. So the judge then asked me, would you like me to take a recess and read your documents? I said, if you would, that'd be great. There's not a lot there, so if you could, that'd be awesome. And he said, okay, recess. So we come back after an hour, and as soon as we walked in, their side and the judges sat down, their side has jumped up demanding money. We want, we want, we want. And the judge is sitting there waving them to sit down. And then finally he abruptly told them, sit down. He told them 3 or 4 times, but then eventually he did abruptly tell them to sit down. He said, you're getting nothing. Not a thing. And then he looked over to me and he said, now, Mr. Aggett, I've got some questions I need to ask you. Now, these questions he asked me were so pinpoint, you could only answer them with the correct answer. Like, what's the shape of a wheel of a car? Circle. You know, so it was just that pinpoint of a question. And once he'd finished, he asked me one other question. He said, you know, you asked for these contracts so many times. He said, yet they offered one to you in the courtroom, but you didn't even apply to read it. And you only had to ask, are you aware of that? And I said, yes, Your Honour, I was. And he said, so if you're asking for it so many times, why didn't you read it when it was offered? And I said, well, I learned very early on in the process that they stopped responding to me. I said they stopped responding because they didn't want to promote more banter between the two of us. I said, so I started asking, where do you keep a copy of your contract? And they got fearful because I'd got my hands on so many other documents. What if I got hold of one of these documents and published it? So that's why I asked for the document, because every time I did, they would respond by telling, we're going to take you to court if you publish this particular document, which acknowledged the fact that they received my letter. It was irrelevant to the case, it was irrelevant for what I wanted, but it got the response I needed to confirm that I'd written a letter. So now they can't deny I wrote them letters. And he said, okay, I'm going to do an order now. And he said, and be rest assured, this is not to punish you, this is to protect you. And I said, okay. He says, you can't publish the contract. And I said, thank you very much. Have a nice day. Now, That was done for my protection, not for my punishment. And I do have the transcript. If anyone doubts what was said, I've got the transcript. I can prove it. So when we left court, Tuck Thompson was very quick to go to ISS and ask them if they had any statements, and of course they just ignored him and walked past him like a bullet train. And I got to tell you, that would have to be one of the most powerful feelings of absolute earth-shattering moments for my life, to be able to walk out of that courtroom being protected by the courts and not punished by the courts for doing what was right. It took its toll, and we're going to get onto that in the next video, but it just demonstrates it doesn't matter whether they're QCs or barristers or lawyers, it doesn't matter. I'm going to tell you why. A lawyer, a barrister, a QC, the lawyer is the one you give the documents to. Now they speed read your documents because there's so much to read, right? So they speed read it. They get your brief story from you, speed read it, pick out what's relevant, and then they put a file together. Now when it goes to court, to a Supreme Court, the lawyers won't stand up in a Supreme Court. I don't know whether they're not allowed to or it's not their jurisdiction, but they won't stand up in the Supreme Court unless it's probably for a family matter or something. But they will get a QC or a barrister to represent you. Now, depending on how involved your case is. Now again, the QC or the barrister also has not lived this case. You have lived this case. You know every little bit of information there is because you've lived it. The barrister or the QC reads what the lawyer gave him. So the lawyer may not see an important issue that you see as an important issue. He will see what he thinks is relevant and important and miss out on the important issues that really do count when it goes to court. Because had I had a lawyer, the claims ISS were making, the lawyer would have sold me out. Soon as look at me. Yep, he did it. Let's plead out. Let's just sign this and put it to bed. Without even knowing all the facts, because they don't listen. They don't care. They're just after, okay, what can I prove in court and what can't I prove in court? But the fact is even if you don't have all the evidence in a courtroom, once you've said your statement, it's on file. It's been recorded as being said. After that, then you can look for the evidence to back it up if you ever have to go back to court to prove it. And the judge will ask you particular questions about that as to how you're going to prove what you're saying. So going through that process is stressful. Going through the getting to court, more stressful. Going through the conflicts with your employer, more stressful. One stress after another, constantly folding over onto each other, all the way till you get to your day in court. And we'll move on to the repercussions of that in a moment.